Sinners is much deeper than you think. Some people watched a horror movie about the dangers of opening a juke joint in the Deep South. Others watched a film about white vampires eager to steal from black culture and black art. I saw something deeper. Hi gorgeous, my name is Sabrina and welcome to my channel. Sinners was released in 2025 and arguably was the best movie released that year. Truthfully, I had no clue what I was walking into. All I knew that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing a vampire movie starring Michael B. Jordan, and baby, I was there. I was captivated from start to finish, and I even teared up throughout just because of how deep the messaging was. And by the end of this video, 3 things are going to look even deeper to you than you initially thought. 1. The price of being black. 2. What the real tension between the white vampires and black main characters actually was. And lastly, what religion destroyed and what spirituality exposed. But first, let's recap this vampiric horror. Sinners stars Michael B. Jordan as the twin brothers Smoke and Stack, who recently fled Chicago after stealing from 2 notorious gangs to return home to Clarksdale, Mississippi to open a juke joint. The twins have a musically gifted little cousin named Sammy, also known as Preacher Boy due to his father being a pastor. The 3 of them gear up for the grand opening of the juke joint, where Sammy will play his blues music despite his daddy telling him the devil will follow him home if he does. After a day of unspoken sinning and acts of rebellion, the juke joint is bustling. However, it takes a sharp turn when a red-eyed vampire shows up to kill the noise, seemingly for good. Keep in mind Sammy's father's words. One day you keep dancing with the devil and it'll follow you home, because it doesn't just follow Sammy. Let's get into it. The price of being black. Smoke and Stack are very complex, resilient characters. They're former soldiers, formerly gang affiliated, and have experienced the harsh realities of surviving in America as black men. In fact, the movie holds no punches as it opens with the 2 of them hosting a deal of buying an abandoned juke joint from the leader of the KKK named Hogwood. During this encounter, Hogwood disrespects the twins 2 times as he expresses his notable disdain for their blackness. The first sign of disrespect is when Hogwood asks the twins if they're twins. This was Hogwood trying to subtly insult Smoke's intelligence. However, it didn't work out in his favor. And this is what causes Stack to say the iconic, "Nah, we cousins," because that's him also checking him back. The second sign of disrespect is when Smoke decides to ask Hogwood another question. He asks him, has he cleaned the juke joint, when all 3 of them decide to enter. Now Hogwood spits on the floor, and this is very disrespectful, and right off rip we know that Hogwood has no manners, because then he follows up by calling both Stack and Smoke boys. The 2 of them quickly correct this and they say, ain't no boys here, only grown men. Now a lot is happening here, because the first thing that this interaction reminds me of is Jay-Z's song The Life of OJ. The Life of OJ provides racial commentary about how no matter what you do, no matter how much money you make as a black person, all of us will almost always be negatively defined by the same thing. In this context, Smoke and Stack being legally free doesn't garner them respect. If anything, to the white people, they're still slaves just with money. Not to mention, they're legally free black men because of the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery in 1865. However, not so fast. Slavery continued in Mississippi because it heavily relied on the labors of enslaved people, since their economy was built on it, which meant white slave owners could act as they wanted without concern. Mississippi rejected the endorsement of the 13th Amendment and pretty much delayed ratifying or confirming the amendment for years. It wasn't until 2013 that Mississippi confirmed and it officially went through. Now, friend, take a moment and really process all that information. Mississippi played by their own rules, and now we have the full picture as to why Hogwood and his crew plan to come back and kill Stack and Smoke anyway after this deal, because it's all fair game. And if we go deeper, Black Codes, which was first referenced as slave codes during slavery, was born shortly after the 1865 13th Amendment, especially in the South during the Reconstruction era, which struggled with deciding what to do with newly freed black people. This was the build-up to Jim Crow, as black people who were supposed to have freedom were restricted from basic human experiences that only white people could have. Heavy segregation, low wages, how black people interacted with one another, and the list goes on. Thus, the KKK used this as a means to wreak havoc on the black community. And when you think about it, the KKK was just upholding a standard that the state set in the first place. Now, I'm not religious, but they all going to hell. the hottest part of it as well. Hogwood spitting on the floor also made me think he's done this more than once, as we later discover he did, as he's already got this performance down. Only difference is he's intimidated by the twins because not only do they have money, but they have guns, putting him at a disadvantage, hence why he comes back with the crew later. This also speaks to the falsehood of owning property as a Black American. We're still facing gentrification, we're still seeing states taking generational Black homes, and we're being priced out of even buying homes even if we have the money. In the next scene, Stack and Smoke have picked up Sammy from the plantation he resides on, and they have a deep conversation about many different Black experiences. Now, we know Smoke and Stack had an abusive dad, and it feels on brand to their character to ask Sammy if his daddy's doing right by him. Smoke also follows up by asking Sammy if his father has been putting his hands on him. Now, Sammy answers this by saying, nah, not too much, but almost in a nonchalant manner. This reminded me of a conversation interview style recording of James Baldwin, who was a Black gay writer slash activist, and Nikki Giovanni, who was a Black queer poet slash activist as well. It's a beautiful conversation between the two of them where they're not trying to fight to win, but they're simply collaborating to understand. An interesting point gets brought up between them as they navigate talking about the Black household, and Nikki asks James, how can the Black man be nothing in the streets and so fearful in his home that he can be brutalized by a white person somewhere and then come home and treat me, which is her, my mother, the same way he's been treated. This was Nikki's rebuttal to James Baldwin saying that the Black man was powerless. It reminded me of this conversation so much because beatings are so normalized in the Black community. It's known in the Black community that you want to at least be beaten by your mother, because if it's by your father, who works every single day tirelessly, he's more likely 9 times out of 10 to take everything out on you, because now every single day that he goes to work, he's working for the white man, and the white man is breathing down his neck, and mothers are usually the ones who step in and end up taking that brute force so that it doesn't go to their children. And this pretty much causes so many imbalances in the Black household because of how much slavery has contributed to how we function in a space, and even to this day, how our parents go and they work so hard that they come home that they don't have a proper release, and it ends up being taken out on those around them. Sammy says his dad does whoop his siblings, but only when they deserve it, and his mama mostly does all the whoopings. Now, this speaks to what I just mentioned. The only difference is that Sammy is the son of a preacher, and because his father is a preacher, he has church and religion to use as an outlet to express his inner demons, which provides further commentary that many Black women, especially Black mothers, have to end up being the bad guy because they have to do most of the disciplining, because they spend most of the time with the children as the husbands are out working really hard for the white man, and that in return makes them have inner suffering further than what they're already experiencing, because now they don't have time for themselves, they don't have a means of an outlet, so they essentially have to be the one to hold down the fort and take care of everything, which also causes an imbalance inside the Black household. An added layer to this conversation is when Stack tells Sammy that their father used to whoop him more than Smoke, and because of that, Smoke ended up killing their father. Stack also follows up by saying he ain't mean it with a chuckle after describing the fact that his father used to abuse him. This is such an emotional statement, and I immediately recognized the fact that Stack was giving his father grace. And the reason he was giving him grace is because the twins lost their mother pretty much, I want to say they insinuated at birth. And because of that, there are theories that their father abused them, or mostly abused Stack, for the fact that she died during birth. But it's also just further commentary about how racism, the intensive racism that happened in the South, once again impacted those family dynamics. And that is the reason why all 3 of them were incapable of getting along once the mother, who was taking most of the fall of this situation, is now gone. This pretty much let me know that Stack, as many Black children, feel like they have to be grateful for the fact that they're where they are in their life because of a parent in abusive situations. But what Stack doesn't understand, that this absolves his father and many abusers of their actual actions. Their father chose to put his hands on Stack. He also chose to put his hands on Smoke. He also chose to beat Stack even worse than Smoke. To me, this represented that Stack wears his heart on his sleeve and that he doesn't take things too personally, which is why he's so forgiving. And we know that this is a detriment to his character because we also see that same people pleaser ways with Mary. Which is why I believe Smoke acts on Stack's behalf, because he believes in justice. And he also doesn't respect his father for the fact that he intentionally decided to hurt Stack. And in a way, I saw this as Smoke preserving Stack's little innocent inner child, because that's the only thing that's not concealed by his sins. And speaking of innocence, Stack is a liar. But I think he's an ethical liar. When he and Sammy are alone, he lies to him about the guitar that he and Smoke gave him, being Charlie Patton, a famous blues musician, when it's actually their abusive daddies. To me, I feel like Stack did this to preserve Sammy's youth and to also instill confidence in him that if he's holding greatness, that he in return will be great. I also saw this as a scene of Stack being the father that he wished he had, or the father that he deserved. Because while Sammy may not be a child anymore, he's still a child in the eyes of Stack and Smoke, who essentially nurture him, and they also express to him how proud they are of him, unlike his father. Sammy is essentially just a young man that's looking for guidance that doesn't stifle him or dim his light. In the next scene, Stack takes Sammy to the train station. He has him meet a man named Delta Slim, who is an amazing musician with an alcohol addiction, and gasses Sammy up to him by stating he's the finest blues player in all of the Delta. Now, almost immediately, Delta Slim downplays what Sammy can do. He says that he has socks older than him, and he even says, "Hey, what do you know about the blues?" When Sammy suggests showing him and not telling him, Delta Slim actually takes a great offense to this, and he says, "If you were someone else, I would have cut you." And then on top of that, Stack didn't take that too lightly, and he says, "Well, that harmonica will be shoved down your throat." This represents how sometimes solidarity can be fickle in the Black community. There's room for all of us to eat, but it always feels like we're in competition, especially since slavery took so much from us and pitted us against one another. The harsh truth of this situation is that many of our Black elders and older folks feel like they're in competition with the Black youth. And instead of uplifting them or even recognizing that it's homage, they will simply put them down because they fear being replaced. And it just makes me question, why gatekeep from your people when you can simply just put them on? When everyone starts arriving at the juke joint, Mary Stack's ex-lover and childhood friend shows up. When Mary enters the juke joint, she has a very frustrating interaction with Sammy. Sammy tells her, "I'm with the twins." And Mary so ignorantly says to him, "Boy, get the F out my face." This is microaggressive. Mary is way too comfortable calling Sammy a boy, especially with the historical implications of white slave masters calling enslaved Black men boys as a way to dehumanize them. Not to mention, Stack and Smoke almost knock Hogwood's head off just for simply insinuating that they were boys. This scene represented to me how the Black community is so quick to invite anyone to the cookout. The privilege will shine through, and it's so infuriating because it opens doors for the Black community and Black culture to be appropriated. When Sammy asks Mary, "What is she?" she says, "I'm a human being." Notice how Mary didn't say that she was Black. Mary claims Blackness when it benefits her, aka to get into the juke joint and bump elbows with the folks she grew up with, but she can't even say confidently that she's one of them. What confirms this is when Mary tells Sammy that her mother's father was half Black, making Mary and her mother mixed. Race is based on physical traits among people of shared ancestry. Identities are very important to distinguish because calling people Black who are not Black or who are biracial erases the identity of monoracial Black people who have 4 Black grandparents and both Black parents. That is a problem and a privilege in itself because Black monoracial people do not have the opportunity to choose how they want to identify racially. And I'm not saying that biracial people can't identify as Black. What I am saying is that it's important to acknowledge your privilege and to express the distinction so that way Black monoracial people do not have representation removed from them. This reminds me of actress Zendaya. Zendaya is biracial and has stated she acknowledges her privilege as a light-skinned woman to not take up spaces where she shouldn't, especially to darker-skinned Black women. So she goes for race-neutral or parts written for white girls. And even that is to open more doors for Black women and girls in the industry. It's truly mind-boggling to me because everyone wants to be black all of a sudden, but they don't want the black experience that comes with it. Part of the tragic reality of the black experience is the unexplained deaths that happen time after time, year after year.
Since the body of Gerard Jackson was found hanging in a wooded area in Michigan right outside the Electric Forest Festival that he was attending, his death was ruled a suicide. It has been a little over 2 weeks since the body of Tone Miller was found hanging in a park in Miami. Her death ruled a suicide. It has been about 4 months since the body of Kyle Basinga was found in Georgia hanging. None of this is okay, and none of this is normal.
And obviously, being black isn't synonymous with trauma or pain or even death. Being black to me is the embodiment of tenaciousness, an epitome of elegance, as it's not something everyone is capable of handling or being. But it's 2026, and people are still vouching for the one drop rule. And the one drop rule is simply just if you had an ounce of black blood in your body, that you were now considered black. And this was just essentially to uphold slavery during the Jim Crow era. Haley, I'm aware she got the part due to having an eighth of black blood, and Mary are white with black ancestral traces. It doesn't make them black. Many black Americans have white traces in their bloodline. In fact, many of them have it because of the sexual assault of their ancestors. I even have an English last name that has contributed to the enslavement of black people and their abuse and suffering. The real truth is that many non-black people want to associate with blackness because they want to benefit from our culture, and they also want to pass to say the N-word. And this is just to not appear as racist as those who are not black, who will never claim to be black and persist with their ignorance. To me, both are the same coin, different sides. And ironically, when Stack tells Mary that she should get on out of here and that she should go live her rich white life, she says, "I never wanted to be white. I wanted to be with you." Mary, girl, if you don't get out of my face. Also, if you're currently enjoying the video, please don't forget to hit that like button. The real tension between the white vampires and the black main characters. I know Remick is a burning topic, as many people made the immediate connection that he was a representation of a colonizer stealing from black art and essentially taking from black culture. And to some extent, that's the case. When Remick and his clan gang approached the juke, they tried to appeal to what black people love the most: music, which is an outlet for our pain. It's hilarious how he makes his own tune, which speaks to what Delta Slim said earlier. He said white people love the blues, but not the people who play it. So while those claims are true, I believe it's even deeper than that, as there's tension between black Americans and white Americans, especially Irish Americans. Walk with me now. What Smoke is asking is not if they're busted up white people in raggedy cloths. He's asking what type of timing is he on. I believe the reasoning for this is because word got around about the 1863 New York City draft riots. The New York City draft riots was a violent protest from Irish Americans in Lower Manhattan as they were frustrated with the laws passed by Congress to draft men into the American Civil War. Now, instead of being angry with the powers that be, they decided to redirect their anger towards black people in their communities. On Monday, July 13th, the Irish mob decided to attack black businesses or any places affiliated with the black community. The mob broke all the windows with paving stones ripped from the street. The mob beat, tortured, and or killed numerous black civilians, including one man who was attacked by a crowd of 400 with clubs and paving stones, then lynched, hanged from a tree, and set alight. The Colored Orphan Asylum at 43rd Street and 5th Avenue, a symbol of white charity to blacks and black upward mobility, that provided shelter for around 230 children, was attacked by a mob at around 4 p.m. A mob of several thousand, including many women and children, looted the building of its food and supplies. However, the police were able to secure the orphanage for enough time to allow the orphans to escape before the building burned down. On Tuesday, July 14th, rioters burned down the home of Abby Gibbons, a prison reformer and the daughter of abolitionist Isaac Hopper. They also attacked white Almagationists such as Ann Derrickson and Ann Martin, two white women who were married to black men, and Mary Burt, a white prostitute who catered to black men. On Wednesday, July 15th, as this news appeared in newspapers, some rioters stayed home, but some of the militias began to return and use harsh measures against the remaining rioters. The rioting spread to Brooklyn and Staten Island. By Thursday, January 16th, order was restored, despite a final confrontation occurred in the evening near Gramercy Park. According to Adrian Cook, 12 people died on this last day of the riots in skirmishes between rioters, the police, and the army. Now, given what happened here, it makes perfect sense and it starts connecting at the fact that Smoke was on edge about Remick's presence. Because historically, we have been burned by the Irish Americans, and now that sets a precedent about how they have behaved towards Black people despite the fact we have done nothing to them or did anything to deserve what took place in the New York City draft riots. Working with Remick would have been the definition of dancing with the devil if Smoke and Stack had made that deal with him, because while Remick doesn't actually blame Black Americans for his oppression as the Irish Americans did it in the New York draft riots, he actually uses them as collateral for the trauma that he's endured, which took place in that riot. And it truly doesn't end there, because now we're on to the next event, the 1919 Red Summer. The 1919 Red Summer was actually yet again another violent, but this time, a 4-day riot in Washington, D.C. began on July 19th when a rumor that Black men had assaulted a white woman incited mobs to attack local Black neighborhoods and assault random African American individuals on the streets. Off-duty sailors and recently discharged Army veterans led the mobs. Many whites feared that the return of tens of thousands of Black veterans would experience living abroad, and more significantly, having received military training, would be unwilling to resubmit to traditional political and social subjugation in the U.S. So, the racial violence of the Red Summer erupted in many other southern locations as well as in the North, most notably in Chicago. Wait, you heard me right. Riots broke out in Chicago. Keep walking with me now. At the beginning of the movie, when Smoke, Stack, and Sammy are driving from the plantation, Sammy says, "I heard y'all ain't got Jim Crow in Chicago. Black man can go anywhere he wants." Smoke quickly shuts this down, and he says that Chicago is Mississippi, just with tall buildings and no plantations. Now, Sammy's face drastically falls, because the harsh realities that freedom doesn't lie solely in the environment starts to impact him. Washington was closely followed by a massive race riot in Chicago. Rioting erupted July 27th when a Black teenager drowned after being hit with stones when he and his friends drifted near a de facto whites-only beach. Violent rioting across Chicago's south and west sides and into the downtown lasted days. With all that said, Smoke and Stack were gone for several years, which means this would have still been felt to some extent as many Black American vets lost their homes and continued to face injustices. Personally, I think it made perfect sense as to why Smoke and Stack robbed the Italians and the Irish, because all the things that they saw, given the effects of the things I just talked about, it would make sense why they would want to go home to deal with the devil that they know. And we're still not done yet, because the next event is the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. It was one of the most horrific examples of white supremacist terrorism in the history of the United States, and knowledge of the event was actively suppressed for over 50 years. From May 31st to June 1st, 1921, the massacre saw the murder of hundreds of Black residents of the Greenwood neighborhood, a bustling and vibrant community known as the Black Wall Street, and more than 1,000 homes and businesses burned to the ground. While Remick didn't want the juke joint, because it was never about that, he wanted Sammy's joy, he wanted his gift, he wanted the community that it entailed because it was rich. He murdered the Black people in the juke joint, and he is trying to steal Sammy's gift, but somehow joining him is better than the oppressor? To me, this represented how oppression eventually corrupts those marginalized, and it trickles down to us fighting one another, hence all the historical events brutalizing the Black community. Remick even says he sensed that Sammy and his gifts will reunite him with his people. That in itself demonstrates the lack of humanity folks see in Black people. Remick, being so consumed by the fact that he lost his community, he never once stopped to think how that would make Sammy feel if he lost his. His response to Smoke asking if he's Klan is humorous, but if you noticed, he never says no. He says they believe in equality and like music. This is a PR answer. He and his clan, they need to start an agency right now, because they have all the right things to say and how to say them and when to say them. Earlier in the movie, when Smoke is at Annie's house, he says he ain't never seen no demons, monsters, etc. Only power from where he's been. So seeing Remick actually shocks the heck out of Smoke, because Remick is all those things, and he also exudes power that Smoke has never seen before, let alone encountered. But this is also the moment that he begins to believe Annie. Not that he didn't believe her before, but it really puts emphasis on his belief in her, because that devil himself that she was talking about earlier has now shown up. This also speaks to Remig's white savior complex. He believes he saved the juke joint by intervening on Hogwood's nephew and wife as they were planning to kill Smoke and Stack. It's ironic because Remig ends up murdering them all anyway. He's no different from Hogwood aside from the fact it's not necessarily racially motivated. Which makes me think, if you truly wanted to help the juke joint, the black people in it, and you also wanted to receive help, why would you recruit clan members? He very well could have just killed them and kept it moving. He even says after everything he plans to recruit Hogwood, and one of his members says they plan to have a cult of love. But that's not how racism works. Love doesn't just remove all the pain and suffering, and it definitely doesn't rehabilitate bigots. Another interesting display is when Remig and his clan gang decide to sing Pick Poor Robin Clean. When I heard this in the theaters, I was just like, I know that's not what I think that is. And when I recently rewatched it, I was like, oh, that's what I think that is. As I'm listening to Remig and the Racist Mystery Gang, I actually zone in on the lyrics. Remig says, pick poor Robin clean, picked his head, picked his feet, I would have picked his body, but he wasn't fit to eat. This line is so twisted because white people used to eat black people, and they used to do it because they felt like they were a delicacy. This is referenced in a book called The Delectable Negro, which is a gut-wrenching read, and it takes a lot of mental willpower to actually get through it. Woodard writes that the consumption of black men by white male enslavers was a natural byproduct of their physical, emotional, and spiritual hunger for the black man. Woodard validates black accounts offering evidence of punishment rituals, including an instance of a slaveholder forcing enslaved people to eat the broiled ear of a member of their community. I love when Stack laughs because Smoke actually looks at him and gives him a disgusted look because, hello, what is actually funny about what these people are saying? To me, this was a sign by Remig suggesting he doesn't need to eat them as he's looking for their inner workings. This is a ritual between him and his subjects, and we see this throughout his musical numbers from the middle to the end. To me, this also represented that Stack is easily impressed, and he's also incredibly naive because he depends so much on Smoke to handle big situations like this. Hence why Smoke is positioned in front of everyone. He's the leader, he's the shield of his people, and his skepticism along with Annie's knowledge is the reason why everyone lived as long as they did. What religion destroyed and spirituality exposed. Christianity is a white man's religion. Let's talk about it. Sammy's father is a pastor and he says, "My son has felt the call of sin, but the good Lord calls upon us to be fishers of men who sin and show them the way." Show them what way? I hope it's the truth because many people don't know the tragic history between Christianity and Black Americans, as it's not easily accessible unless you find a bunch of books on it or you go to open exhibits like the one that Harvard University had. I was able to find an article from the Washington Post that explicitly talked about this. Christianity was pro-slavery, said Yolanda Pierce, the dean of the Divinity School at Howard University. So much of early American Christian identity is predicated on a pro-slavery theology. From the naming of the slave ships to who sponsors some of these journeys, including some churches, to the fact that so much of early American religious rhetoric is deeply intertwined with slaveholding, it is pro-slavery. Now, this is an interesting concept because, as I said, Sammy's father is a preacher and he preaches this very word, which in return now further enslaves his people. He tries to brainwash Sammy into believing his music is sinful, but what this really is a crabs in a bucket mentality. The saying crabs in a bucket stems from when you go to a fish market, you see a bucket of crabs, there will always be a few trying to escape, but the other crabs will make sure that they never escape by bringing them down to try to bring themselves forward. We get a closer glimpse of this mentality when Sammy is picking cotton early in the morning and a woman called Beatrice hears him humming, and she asks him, "You gonna tell me where you playing or am I gonna have to hear it through the grapevine?" Sammy tells her, "You have a good one, Beatrice," aka mind your business. And he also says that he'll see her at service, to which she says, "I guess I'll have to find out through the grapevine." I guess you will, Beatrice. This is spiritual warfare. Not only did they separate black people intentionally, but they also severed the mental connections that we had with one another. Beatrice was going to sell Sammy out to his father because during slavery, enslaved black people who feared freedom would tell the slave master of those who were trying to escape. This is the second instance that we get to see how enthralled the community is with religion. When Sammy's dad says, "One day you keep dancing with the devil, it's gonna follow you home," the call is coming from inside the house. Sammy rather deal with the evil he doesn't know because the evil he does keeps him stagnant and submissive. It's ironic because when Smoke and Stack are riding with Sammy at the beginning of the movie, they say they came home to Mississippi to deal with the evil they know, and I internalized this as Chicago was an illusion of choice. It made them believe that things would be different in Chicago compared to Mississippi, and spiritually in some ways it did. It made them more refined men, they had more money, and it also exposed them to opportunities they would have never had in the South. The twins were able to accomplish so much in the 7 years that they were gone, despite how racist it was in Chicago. And when you think about it, this was a luxury compared to what Sammy is currently going through. The irony lies in the fact that both twins die in Mississippi from dealing with the devil they thought they knew. Sammy got to live a long flourishing life when he escaped that mindset. I believe this also represented when Smoke and Stack showed Sammy the truck full of beer that they stole. Now, this could mean two things. The first thing is the people they stole from put the snake in the back in hopes it kills them. However, this ends up delaying their karma because it didn't in fact kill them. Or it could be symbolism of their greed and how the two of them have a kill or be killed mentality, which creates an unnerving relationship with trust. What I love about the twins is how self-aware they are. They own their dirt, which is why they tell Sammy to stay far away from the truck after they kill the snake. And I feel like this is a spiritual representation of them not trying to taint Sammy. Because in spirituality, you should never intervene on someone's karma. Because unfortunately, that karma will trickle down to you for even so much as not minding your business. And that's why you need to be mindful about what you interact with. Smoke is very intentional about his choices, whereas Stack is too spontaneous. Neither are bad as they have their perks. It just speaks to how Smoke is in a survival space, scarcity mindset, and Stack is in a space of abundance. It's an optimistic mindset. Hence why Smoke says Stack can't watch his back, and he tells Sammy to be their eyes and ears because he doesn't trust that Stack can handle himself. However, we start to see Smoke's spiritual strength start to dwindle. When Smoke negotiated a price for a sign from Grace, Bo's wife, they tell him all they have is red, and he goes beneath the agreed amount. Now, my mama would actually break my arm if she saw me pick up a red pen and try to sign anything. And as I said, I'm not religious. However, I don't be splitting them poles either. Across many different cultures, especially Black culture, we have quite a few superstitions that we still uphold to this day. I saw this as Smoke going outside of his nature to appease Stack. Because you should always go with your first instinct. And his first instinct was to not open the juke joint that night, but to do it the next week. But Stack believes it's now or never. And this is when we start to see the spiritual repercussions of these decisions. Annie and Smoke have such a spiritual relationship. When Smoke tells her he and Stack are opening a juke joint, she says this was Stack's idea. She knows Smoke isn't about that fast life as he's a peaceful guy. I love how she says, "I thought y'all were northerner men." And Smoke says, "Now we through with Chicago." And she says, "Well, is Chicago through with you?" I love this so much because a few years ago when I was in college, I had a former friend's mom tell me, "Sabrina, listen, I don't know what you're going through, but you're going to have to deal with that because no matter where you go, how far you go, those problems, those things that you're dealing with, they're going to keep following you because it's not the place, it's you. You can't outrun you." And it literally changed my life. And I spent pretty much the whole duration of college just unpacking, doing my shadow work, and understanding, like, listen, I have to be the change that I want to see. And in a way, I feel like this is what Annie was getting at with Smoke. That just because you left Chicago doesn't mean that all the things that y'all have done there, all the trauma that you've endured, all of the bad that you've done is not going to leave you until you actually deal with it. You got to fix your soul and ask for forgiveness because spiritually you're not all there. And we see that as the movie transitions, Smoke is not all there. When the vampire form of Mary attacks Stack and he comes back to life shortly after, Annie tells Smoke that's not his brother. Stack replies, what that witch talking about? You gonna let her come between us again? That really spoke to me because it exposed the spiritual nature of where Smoke and Stack are. This scene of Stack banging on the door, Smoke leaning against it, represents why they may be twins. The two of them ain't been close as they used to be in a long time. Smoke chooses Annie here. They are more spiritually intact with one another as she's given him no reason to doubt her, unlike Stack. In a way, Stack is a devil himself. Taking so much from Smoke made him lose his family, and it caused him to be so bitter because he constantly had to look out for Stack. Smoke needed the reciprocation of looking out and being looked after. But Smoke is a devil in his own way, because throughout the movie he leaves carnage. Shooting those men who tried to steal, hitting Sammy with his gun, pointing the gun at Pearline, who calls him an evil man, keeping Stack away from Mary, and more. When Sammy and Smoke have a heart-to-heart, he exposed that he wanted to switch plantations, but Stack wanted to go to this black-owned town of freed black people called Mound Bayou, but were rejected by the mayor because he believed their daddy was evil, which meant they were too. And maybe there was some truth in that. I also really appreciated Annie's self-awareness because she tells Smoke, like, listen, you're gonna have to kill me because I don't want to be any of those things when things start heating up with the vampires trying to break in. Smoke is initially opposed to this, but she says she's got someone waiting for her and him as he looks at the table where she's giving herself a reading. Annie knew that they all were going to die, but she wanted to have that trust and faith in Smoke that they could pull it off in the way that he thought they could. It also hurt me so bad when Annie gets bit by Stack and she looks at him and she whimpers, "Not you." And Smoke is yelling Elias, not even Stack's nickname, not Annie. Because anyone but Annie would have been better. This really let me know that Stack never valued Smoke's feelings. His always took priority. Stack even says to Smoke after he did this that everything is going to be alright. To me, I feel like Smoke didn't realize that he's been living with a vampire this whole time because Stack feeds on his energy, which is why I have a theory why he is the more high energy twin. So when Annie tells Smoke to kill her again, he does it. He knows Annie deserves to be with the ancestors, not here on earth with the sinners. The I love you he gives her before she dies is one that's filled with passion and emotion. It gives me chills every time because it's almost as if he's giving her an honorable death. And he also is just in full admiration for the fact that she fought as long as she did and as hard as she did. I also never noticed that when Stack tries to bite Smoke's neck, there's a chime sound and a force field that blocks him and gives Smoke the upper hand to kill him. Smoke says, "I tried to keep you safe," and Stack says, "You always have." This was an early departure between the two of them. I feel like this is where that spiritual tie between them really gets severed. Sammy also returning home to his father was the key to acceptance. This was a full circle moment Sammy needed to confront his trauma to move on. Smoke killing those clan members was to finish what they started and to move on. And he returns to his true home, which is with Annie, as Sammy looks for a new one, which is being a musician. And yes, we know that Annie tells Smoke, "Put out that cigarette because I don't want the smoke getting all over the baby," meaning drop his persona, and to leave all that hoopla at the door. But it's even deeper than that because Smoke didn't die a sinner, he died a hero. He went out following up on his promise to Annie about not letting her turn, and Stack, to keep him safe as he's alive as a vampire in the juke joint, gets Sammy back home so that he can be left with the choice to do what he pleases. And he also ends all the clan members to protect his people in Mississippi. I internalized this scene as Smoke making his rounds before his death. While he may not have known, I definitely think maybe deep down he had a feeling because he honored everyone. And that was him making peace with all of his sins and just trying to do some good before he leaves the world. Forget all the heaven hell stuff. He just wanted to be in a free space, and the free space is with the ancestors, with his baby, and with Annie. And I saw this as him finally choosing himself and doing what he wants to do without the involvement of Stack or anyone else. I also believe Sammy keeping his guitar that was broken by Remick in the end, sure, it symbolizes his transition into being a professional musician, but I also think it's a remembrance of the best day of his life, that he got to hold it close because that is the last time he's going to see his cousins. And I think that's when he realized, as he's driving by himself to who knows where, that everything is not going to be as it was. I believe it was also an encouragement to be better than them and to continue fighting for his dream of freedom to play his blues. I even love how he named his club after Pearline, his first love, as an additional remembrance. Oh, and the absolute agony of seeing Sammy old breaks me every time, especially when Stack comes in, because now you really get a picture of how Sammy lived his full life, and essentially Stack is still stagnant. He's the same person, he's the same everything, which everybody in the movie tries to avoid but him. You can also see the disappointment when Sammy tells him he doesn't want to be turned, because all Stack has is Mary. Sammy is really the last family he has, and he has to sit with the fact that no one wants to roam the earth forever because there's not much beauty in searching for a place to belong. Essentially, he'll be eternally looking for freedom. Not to mention the most beautiful lines uttered ever. Sammy says, "Before the sun went down, that was the best day of my life. Was it like that for you?" Stack replies, "The last time I seen my brother, the last time I seen the sun, just for a few hours, we was free." This line seals the whole movie for me. It's truly an unspoken word amongst Black Americans that we have to cherish every single moment that we have with one another, because we don't usually connect because of how physically separate we are. But when we do, we never know if this is going to be our last time with one another because of the dangers of the world and all the things that we go through. That's why it hurts so much to leave family game nights, to leave Sunday dinners, to leave the cookout, because for many Black people, life isn't always guaranteed. Those moments are also where dreams form and get lost, because once it's all done, you're back to reality. And when you think about it, Sammy's the only one who truly got to live and accomplish what he wanted, all thanks to his cousins. In conclusion, I absolutely love Sinners. Like, during this rewatch, I discovered so many foreshadows. One of those foreshadows was Delta Slim, and I have to skip his part every time when he dies, because hearing him holler and then seeing the blood drip down and then he gets covered, I'm just like, that is probably one of the worst deaths to ever have. But he says something really interesting, that when they're all gathering and they're talking about how they're going to fight the vampires, he tells Sammy, like, listen, I've danced with the devil before, and he had a light-skinned vampire bite all over him, but he was able to overcome it and defeat the devil, essentially, because the devil can't get him down. So you can kind of internalize his final moments as maybe the devil finally caught up with him for being a sinner, or him relinquishing that control and finally doing something right in his life. I also think about Stack telling Cornbread's wife that he'll bring him back, and then he can't bring him back because he died. So in my mind, I kind of just write some fan fiction where I'm just like, you know what, at nighttime, Stack goes to visit her and lets her know that he's dead, just for my peace of mind, because Cornbread ticked me off. You went all the way in the fields to use the bathroom, and like Delta Slim said, why can't you just pee at the door and go get mad? So if you ask me, he got what he got. I'm not saying the man needed to die, but he got what he got for being foolish. And the one that breaks me completely is when Sammy's driving alone at the end holding the guitar, because earlier that day, Stack had told him he could drive the car on the way back, but he didn't mention whether he would be there or not, or whether all of them would be returning back or not. So that kind of spoke out to me about how, like, the cut of the tongue is very important, because how you say things can play out that way, but it can sometimes not go in your favor in the way that you meant them. Thanks for watching, gorgeous. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe for more movie reviews, and if you want to continue watching, just click the video on the screen. And if that's all, I'll see you in the next one. Bye, gorgeous.